In Pursuit of Vision Part 2. Doing what God has called you to do in a place of work that is totally against it. Written by Oluwasemilore Olasemeji. Other books by the author. In Pursuit of Vision, Part 1: What to do, how to do it, and when to do it when God drops a vision into your heart. Unmasking You, questions to help you confront your real self. 21 Things I Know About Quality People. 21 Essential Lessons for Young People, practical insights on navigating and thriving in the next 5 decades of your life. Tavuna, A Journey into the City of Intelligence. To download any of these books, please visit www.selar.com/m/hpbooksglobal. God bless you. Reader's note. It's important to understand that the title of this book does not imply a condemnation of all workplaces. Instead, the author aims to highlight that while work is inherently valuable for human flourishing, certain ingrained systems within the work environment can inadvertently cause harm. The author's central point is to encourage readers to identify and actively address these normalized yet potentially damaging systems before they negatively impact us. This book is not a criticism of work itself, but rather a call to ensure that these embedded systems do not ultimately undermine our well-being. With this understanding, we encourage you to approach this book open-mindedly. Thank you, and God bless you. Hpbooksglobal. Introduction. I clearly remember my high school days when I lived with my parents. They took care of everything back then. Sometimes, I felt it wasn't fair when we didn't get some things we wanted, or when mom and dad argued about money. We didn't really know what to do about it. We just knew we always had food, clothes, and a bed. Life seemed so easy, like it would never change. We could do whatever we wanted without any stress. All we had to do was ask our parents, like going to an ATM, and they usually gave us what we asked for pretty quickly. I still remember the days leading up to my WASH exams when I realized my parents couldn't pay the fees. I was so upset. I thought, why me? Am I the only unlucky one? Why aren't my parents taking my life seriously? Back then, I was too busy complaining to see that my parents woke up super early to go to work, hoping to catch government workers as customers. Their business wasn't easy, but they still managed to pay for my WAEC. The worst part is, I failed the exam. Actually, everyone in the school failed. It was a constant problem in our school back then. Even though my parents struggled to get the money, it didn't change the poor results our school had. It feels like a fact of life, our efforts were wasted because the school authorities didn't have things in order. I began to realize that I needed to take responsibility for my own life. My parents had worked hard to send all of us to school. My older brother was still in university, and our family faced a huge financial challenge at that time. However, we all navigated that difficult period together, knowing we would come out stronger. Unfortunately, those challenges also messed up our family's religious routine, including our prayer time. It felt like an attack, didn't it? You plan for a bright future, only to see things not go as expected. At first, I thought my parents weren't capable enough, but I later realized that when life throws challenges your way and you're still going, you should be grateful. When someone with a clear vision loses interest, or a happy family loses its spark, and things generally go wrong, it often means some important principles have been ignored. We should be careful not to blame those affected without understanding the bigger picture. You probably understand what I'm talking about, right? Maybe right now you feel very close to God. But when life gets busy, you might slowly stop doing things God told you to do. You might suddenly realize you don't have time to pray for 10 hours or even read for 2 hours to improve yourself, like you used to. This is because life's demands have increased a lot. You have big challenges to face, and you can't just ignore the practical things God told you to do. Just praying isn't always enough to solve these problems, you also need to take care of the practical side of life. If your parents are still taking care of you while you're reading this, be thankful and start preparing for when you'll need to handle things yourself. And if you've already started taking responsibility for your life, be thankful for that too. Fulfilling what God has called us to do at work can be really challenging. Sometimes, we're scared by what life throws at us when we try to stand for the kingdom. Maybe it's losing a job or even customers. The consequences might even be so big that you can't take care of your family, just like it was for my family at one point. But we need to realize that even with these difficulties, you can still balance your work life with your relationship with God, and at the same time, God's name can be glorified through you at work. It is possible. The reward will surely come, even if it's not right away. Oh yes, it's not easy, but it is possible. What I've learned is that it's never too late to start acting wisely so that things bring you peace. I always say, write down the things you believe God wants you to do, and promise yourself that you won't let life's challenges stop you from achieving them. So, start reading this book knowing that you'll find some answers to the problems you're facing in this area. I want to be clear that I don't have all the solutions, but I've experienced some progress in this myself, otherwise, I wouldn't have written this book. God bless you. Chapter 1. Be sure that it is God who wants you there. If there's one key thing to keep in mind as we explore this, it's that God has a specific purpose for each of us, and a particular place where we're meant to carry it out. It can get confusing when we find ourselves in a job or situation that isn't actually where we're supposed to be, according to God's plan. Makes sense so far? Now, let's rewind a little. There's a step we probably should have considered before we even got to this point. And honestly, I have a feeling you already know what that step is, right? Okay, let me spell it out for you. Think about it. How can we be truly sure God wants us in a certain place if He hasn't spoken to us about it? And even if we think we've heard Him, how confident can we be if we haven't developed a deep, personal connection with Him? You know that saying, "My sheep know my voice," right? Exactly. We can't be certain about God's will for us in a particular situation if we haven't heard from Him directly. And that clear hearing comes from building that strong, personal relationship with Him. But hey, listening to God shouldn't feel like a huge ordeal, right? I mean, I don't have to jump through all these religious hoops just to hear from Him when I need to. Does that sound like you? Well, it's fine to say you hear from God, and hearing His voice is even better. But even more important than that is knowing Him. Knowing what He's likely to say and what He wouldn't. Knowing what He's capable of and what He has promised not to do. Think about it, haven't you ever gotten a message supposedly from someone you know well, and you just knew it wasn't them? You could tell by the way it was written or what it said. And you were right, because it turned out it wasn't them at all. So, you see what I'm getting at, right? Exactly. God might speak to me in one way today, maybe a strong, clear feeling, and then communicate in a completely different way next week, maybe through a subtle nudge or a gentle thought. But how will I know it's really Him? Exactly. It comes down to knowing His character, His personality, not just expecting a specific kind of voice. After all, He doesn't have just one way of speaking. Now, the title of this book pretty much spells it out, doesn't it? It's really for those of us who are called to do something for God, but find ourselves in a work environment that seems completely opposite to that calling. Isn't that the case? And if that's where we are, the very first thing we need is assurance, real confidence that if we're going to work somewhere and say God sent us, that's the truth. So, how do you really get to know someone? That's a huge question, isn't it? Probably too big for just one book. You've likely heard of ministers like Joyce Meyer, right? That amazing woman. I'm sure if you read some of her books, you'd get a lot of clarity on this. But before you do, let me give you an example that might help. Remember that story I shared about the fake message? Think about why you were so sure it didn't come from that person. It's because you know them, right? Exactly. You've spent a good amount of time with them, and you have a sense of how they see the world and how they'd likely respond in different situations. You've walked alongside them, maybe even worked with them, and you could confidently speak about their character because you have solid evidence. You see the connection? That's the kind of relationship it should be between you and God. You know, the reality of life is this: God can't be fooled. Whatever we put in, we'll get back. And when we plant a seed, it always grows, right? That's my point exactly. So, let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. You're the only one reading this right now, right? Okay, take a deep breath and ask yourself, do I truly have a personal relationship with God? Do I know Him? You have a close connection with your spouse, and you probably spend a lot of time with them because of that deep intimacy. Right? So, what about God? How deep is your relationship with Him? I think it's really important to take this seriously because God doesn't have just one specific way of speaking. If you think He only sounds a certain way, and that's all you're listening for, you might end up mistaking other voices for His, even negative ones. If you feel like God has given you a task, but you don't have that strong, personal connection with Him, then that's something you really need to focus on. And you know what's just amazing about God? He's made connecting with Him so accessible. He's given us the incredible opportunity to pray and simply spend time with Him, what we call sweet fellowship. Isn't that wonderful? Oh yeah, I know there's sometimes a question about how we can be called children of God, right? But think about it, there's no debate about calling an adopted child your child, is there? Exactly. The very foundation of God's kingdom shows us that we get to enjoy the privilege of adoption. It tells us that the Spirit we receive doesn't make us slaves, living in fear, but instead, this Spirit welcomes us into His family. And because of Him, we can call out, Abba, Father. Okay, take a moment to consider that. I'm sure you believe that someone can be possessed, right? I mean, a spirit entering someone's body. You've seen someone who's mentally unwell before, right? Exactly. If a spirit can enter a person and cause them to lose their mind, then it makes sense that God's Spirit can enter us and bring about our adoption as His children. And here's another really important point to think about. If you were to adopt a child as your son or daughter, wouldn't you naturally want them to resemble you in many ways? You'd expect to see similar traits, habits, and ways of doing things, right? Absolutely. And if we feel that way about an adopted child, imagine how much more God, our Father, would want that for us. He'll make sure He spends enough time with us, so much so that we start to think like Him, act like Him, and ultimately, be accountable to Him. You see the connection now, right? So, the ball's now in your court to make sure you truly know God, not just recognize His voice. It goes deeper than that. You need to understand how He thinks and how He operates. And this is especially crucial if you know He wants you in a workplace where it's challenging to live out your purpose or honor Him because of the pressures of life. This isn't just casual advice, it's about a real assignment, and you need to be absolutely sure you've received clear guidance. These kinds of tasks are often demanding, and you can't navigate them on your own. You know about intimacy, right? I mean, those small, consistent things you do with someone you love to build that connection. Exactly, those little moments truly matter, and it's the same when you're building your relationship with God. If you're married, you know that feeling of intimacy with your spouse, right? It's like there's nowhere else you'd rather be in that moment. You're not dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, you're fully present. I remember vividly one time, I was singing worship songs, and it felt like I was about to be completely enveloped by something. I was just there, immersed in God's glory. I played my part by offering Him worship, and He responded by meeting me in His divine presence. Isn't God amazing? So now you see the importance of intentionally starting those practices that draw you closer to God, right? And it needs that consistent effort, just like you consciously plan dates and intimate moments with your spouse. Even when those special moments happen spontaneously, your whole being is drawn to the present because it feels like the most wonderful place to be. It's the same with God. In those moments of fellowship with Him, the past fades away, the future doesn't matter, there's only the present. Time almost stands still when you're in His presence because there's nowhere more significant to be. There's no need to rush, it's okay to take it slow. You simply want to remain in that present moment forever because that's where He dwells. Now, please don't misunderstand me, I'm not saying that God can't guide you if you don't have a deep, established relationship with Him. Not at all. You don't have to be incredibly close to God to receive direction from Him. However, I can tell you from experience that when you find yourself in the thick of things and confusion sets in, the lack of a strong, intimate connection can become apparent. You might end up feeling frustrated, almost as if you hadn't heard from Him in the first place.